Hey guys, in today's lecture we'll be discussing the concept named Dasein put forth by Martin Heidegger, and we'll be comparing the concept with the poem Who is Who written by W.H. Auden. Now this is a brief lecture which is purely taken from an examination point of view, so stay tuned. Now Martin Heidegger is a German philosopher and he was an exponent of existentialism. Now, existentialism is a philosophy that believes that we are responsible for creating purpose or meaning in our own lives. Existentialists believe that we are responsible for shaping our lives. We are responsible for creating meaning to our lives. And Martin Heidegger was an exponent of existentialism. And he was also preoccupied with the concept of ontology, that is the study of being. His magnum opus work is Being and Time, which was published in the year 1927. Please do take note. They might ask this for a 1-mark question. In this work, he developed a method called phenomenological testimony. Now, what is phenomenological testimony? Here, in this method, Martin Heidegger argues that our ordinary feelings of anxiety testifies or proves the groundlessness of human existence. So we might feel anxious all the time, or we might feel anxious when we think about our lives. And why is it so? We feel anxious when we feel that our life is worthless, or there is nothing to our life. When we feel that nothing adds meaning to our life, we may feel anxious. Now, one of the major feelings that all human beings have at some point in their life is the feeling of insecurity. And it is an unavoidable feeling. You will feel insecure at some point in your life. You will feel anxious. Because life is unpredictable. Even your existence at times may feel lacking in value. You might feel that your existence, your human existence is lacking in value. That your existence doesn't add value to anything. At some point in your life, you might feel this. And at that time, you might feel anxious. നിങ്ങളുടെ ലൈഫ് കൊണ്ട് ഒരു വാല്യൂ ഇല്ല എന്ന് നിങ്ങൾക്ക് ചിലപ്പോൾ തോന്നും. There is a groundlessness of human existence. You might feel that your life does not add value to anything. So this in turn creates a kind of insecurity within us. We feel insecure in this manner because our identities and roles with which we define what we are have always already been shaped by a past that we can never get behind. Now, why do we feel anxious all the time, or why do we feel insecure at times? This is because at one level, our identities and roles are already preordained. So we are defined by our identities and roles that we play in society, right? Now, in your family, you will be a son or a daughter. In your college, you will be a student. Now, from the moment that you are born, you are assigned this role of being a son or a daughter to your father or mother or your caregiver. And you are also assigned the role of being a student right from the point in which you are born. So in a way, our identities are already shaped by the past. And we cannot change it. We cannot alter the past. Put it in a simple manner. Suppose you were born to a family that has a strict father, right? So suppose you are born to a family that has a strict head of the family or father. Then from the moment that you are born, you cannot alter the fact that your father is a strict person. So you will have a very strict upbringing. Suppose you were born to a family that is filled with warmth. where your parents are always friendly with you, then nothing can alter it, nothing can change it. They will provide a very friendly atmosphere at home, they will provide warmth, and in a way that shapes who you will become. Right, in the future too, you might too show warmth towards your children, whereas when you are raised by a very strict father, chances are you too will become a strict father or a mother in the future. Right, so you cannot in any way determine what will happen to you, and this makes us feel insecure. That is what Heidegger said. This means that when we are born, we are already thrown into relationships and identities that define us. From the moment we are born, certain identities are ascribed to us. Right? Mostly in a heteronormative society, sometimes if a person is born, he is assigned the role of being a boy or a girl. Now things have changed, but still people immediately state the gender of the child at the point in which you are born, right? ഇന്നും അങ്ങനെയാണ്. ഒരു കുഞ്ഞ് ജനിച്ചു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ കുട്ടി ആണാണോ പെണ്ണാണോ നോക്കും, ആൻഡ് ഇമ്മീഡിയറ്റ്ലി ഒരു ഐഡന്റിറ്റി ഞാൻ ആസ്ക്രൈബ് ചെയ്ത് കൊടുക്കും, ദാറ്റ് ഓഫ് എ മെയിൽ ഓർ എ ഫീമെയിൽ. ദാറ്റ്സ് ബിക്കോസ് വി ലിവ് ഇൻ എൻ heteronormative society. But in the future, things might change. In the future, some parents might say that let the child decide which gender he or she belongs. So the truth is that we are thrown into relationships and identities that define us from the moment you are born. From the moment you are born, it is decided whom your father will be, whom your mother will be, whom your sister will be, and what kind of an education you will get. Now see, if you are born a boy, there is 100% chance that you will get a better chance at education. If you are born a girl, in some places, in some countries, and girls are not given equal opportunities. Even they are not given equal opportunity to learn. So even before you are born, your identity is being decided, and that may make you feel insecure. So this characteristic of human being is called Dasein, where you are thrown into relationships and identities that define you. So this characteristic of human being, or Dasein, which is translated as being unto death. So your being is decided from your birth unto your death. Being there, it is also translated as being there, which means that your identity is always already shaped in the past. You have been there, so you are being there. Right? And you are also a being who is aware of your own mortality. Humans are aware of the fact that if you are born, then one day you will have to die. Right? ഒരിക്കൽ ജനിച്ചാൽ ഒരിക്കൽ മരിക്കുമെന്ന് നമുക്ക് എല്ലാവർക്കും അറിയാം. So we are aware of that fact. Now this characteristic of human being is termed as Dasein. It is also called thrownness or facticity. That is, we know what will become of us in the future. We are thrown into a series of relationships. We are thrown into a series of identity, and we know what will happen to us in the future. Now, a second feature of human being is existentiality or transcendence, whereby a human being appropriates his or her world, impressing on it the unique image of his or her own existence and potential. Now, the second feature that is very much characteristic of a human being is his existentiality or transcendence. So, a human being appropriates his or her own world. A human being creates in a way his or her own world. He tries to change his or her own world, or he tries to impress on the world a unique image of his or her existence and potential. So we try to change the world in our own way. We try to leave a footprint, or we try to leave our own image in this world. Let me put it in a simple manner, right? Now suppose a man is born. Now the moment he is born, his identity is already decided. His roles in the society is already decided. Right? If you are born a man, then you will eventually become the breadwinner of the family, because that identity is already decided and that role is already assigned to you. But when we live, human beings also appropriate his or her own world. What do you mean by appropriate his or her own world? We try to, in a way, change our own world in a manner which is best suited for us, right? So when we start living, we try to work hard, we try to make more money, we try to live a good life. If it is a man, he will always aim at certain aspirations, right? The man will always aim at a better job, aim for good salary, aim to have a good house, aim to have a good name. Whereas if you take a woman, the moment that she is born, she will try to be docile, she'll try to make the home and hearth. So in a way, we try to impress our own image and our own potential on the world and the way in which we live it. So the world functions in two different ways for a man and a woman. If you consider it that way, you can analyze it in that way too. So if a man sees more opportunities in the world, a woman might find more opportunity in her inner world or within the family. So we try to shape the world in which we live, impressing on it the unique image of our own existence. We try to leave behind image of our own existence, and we try to leave behind things that made us who we are. We try to experiment with our potential. Now, the third characteristic of Dasein is fallenness. That is, we often try to create ourselves, right? We try to create an image of ourselves. So, in attempting to create him or herself, himself or herself, the human being falls from his true being, and he becomes immersed instead in the distractions of day-to-day living and become entangled in particular things. So the second point that we refer to is that each human being, each individual will try to leave behind his own unique image in the world, his own impression in the world. ഈ ലോകത്ത് ജീവിക്കുന്ന ഓരോരുത്തരും അവരുടേതായിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു കാൽപ്പാട് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അവരുടേതായിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു കയ്യൊപ്പ് മാറ്റി വെച്ചിട്ട് ഈ ലോകം വെടിയണം എന്ന് ആഗ്രഹിക്കുന്നവരാണ്. ആരാണെങ്കിലും അവരെ നാളെ ആരെങ്കിലും ഒക്കെ ഓർത്തിരിക്കണമെന്ന് ആഗ്രഹിക്കുന്നവരാണ് മനുഷ്യർ എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്, റൈറ്റ്? Now, the third characteristic of Dasein is that of fallenness. That is, sometimes we try to create ourselves so much so that we fail to identify who we truly are, right? So in order to assert ourselves, we might take recourse to distractions of day-to-day living, and we become entangled with particular things. So instead of finding out who we are, and instead of finding the true purpose of life, human beings will get distracted with the mundane day-to-day activities that he or she has to do, right? ചെറിയ ചെറിയ കാര്യങ്ങൾക്ക് കൂടുതൽ ഇമ്പോർട്ടൻസ് കൊടുക്കും. Instead of focusing more on our being, our state of being, we give more and more focus to the day-to-day mundane trivial activities. So instead of creating an authentic self, we get buried in the distractions of life. അപ്പോൾ നമ്മൾ സ്വന്തമായിട്ട് ഞാൻ ആരാണ് എന്നുള്ളൊരു സ്വത്വബോധം ഉണ്ടാക്കിയെടുക്കുന്നതിന് പകരം നമ്മൾ ഡെയിലി ചെയ്യുന്ന ചെറിയ ചെറിയ ടാസ്കിൽ മാത്രം ഫോക്കസ് ചെയ്ത് നമ്മൾ ജീവിക്കാനായിട്ട് തുടങ്ങുമ്പോൾ, നമ്മൾ ഡെയിലി ഡിസ്ട്രാക്ഷൻസിൽ മാത്രം ഫോക്കസ് ചെയ്ത് നമ്മൾ ജീവിക്കാനായിട്ട് തുടങ്ങുമ്പോൾ, വി ലോസ് എ പേർപ്പസ് ഇൻ ലൈഫ്, റൈറ്റ്? ആൻഡ് വി ബിക്കം ഇൻ എ വേ ഫേക്ക്. Now let me put it in another way to make it more clear to you. Suppose there is a man and he wishes to make a statement in this world. He wishes to leave an imprint in this world. ഒരു imprint leave ചെയ്യണം എന്ന് ആഗ്രഹിക്കുന്നു. Now in today's day and age, we have many social media sites and the like, right? So if the person tried to record each and every aspect of his life in a very truthful manner, only a few people would watch it. So, what he might try to do is he might try to add more flavor to it, more spice to it by focusing only on the good things in life, right? That is what social media does nowadays. We only get to see the good things in people's life. We never get to see the bad things, right? We never get to see their struggles. So we, in a way, try to hide behind the daily distractions, and we hide our authentic self, and we become inauthentic. Thus, we lose our sense of being. നമ്മൾ ആരാണെന്ന് പോലും അറിയാതെ നമ്മൾ ഡെയിലി ചെയ്യുന്ന ഒരേ ചോറ്, ഒരേ ആക്ടിവിറ്റീസ് തന്നെ റിപ്പീറ്റഡ് ആയിട്ട് ചെയ്തുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുമ്പോൾ വി ലൂസ് എ സെൻസ് ഓഫ് സെൽഫ്, റൈറ്റ്? നൗ how does human being overcome such an inauthentic existence and such a loss of being? That is a big question. And Heidegger provides an answer to this question. And the answer to this question is there in the classic statement on existentialism. Now, inauthenticity consists in losing sight of unity of human being, of human existence, caused by attention to practical interest and care of daily existence. So, what happens is that sometimes we lose a track of our lives, right? When we live very mundane life, when we live a very mundane lifestyle, where you follow the same pattern and same chore over and over again, you lose your authentic self. You lose the sense that you are a human being, right? ഒരു യൂണിറ്റി ഉള്ള ഒരു ഹ്യൂമൻ ബീങ് ആണ് നിങ്ങൾ, ഒരു ഇൻഡിവിജ്വൽ ആണ് എന്നുള്ളൊരു സെൻസ് ഓഫ് സെൽഫ് മറന്ന് നമ്മൾ സ്ഥിരം നമ്മൾക്ക് അസൈൻ ചെയ്തിട്ടുള്ള റോൾസ് ഇങ്ങനെ പ്ലേ ചെയ്ത് നമ്മൾ പോകും. വി ലൂസ് our sense of self and we repeatedly do the same jobs that are assigned to us. However, when we become aware of our life, our existence in its totality, as being essentially oriented towards death, the human self attains knowledge of itself as whole, as being unto death. So, what happens is that when you leave the same pattern of life over and over again, you will create an inauthentic self. How will you be able to break free from an inauthentic self? We will be able to break free from an inauthentic self once we become aware that our life is short. Only death can make us reevaluate our life, can make us reevaluate our sense of existence. Only death can make us feel whole, right? So it arises only when we have feelings of death. We become more authentic when we feel that we might die tomorrow. ചിലപ്പോൾ ചില ആളുകളുണ്ട്, ഒരു ലൈഫ് ത്രെറ്റനിങ് ഡിസീസ് ഡയഗ്നോസ് ചെയ്ത ഉടനെ അവർക്ക് അവരാരാണെന്ന് കണ്ടെത്താനുള്ളൊരു അതിയായ ആഗ്രഹം ഉണ്ടാവും, റൈറ്റ്? ദേ വിൽ try to find out who they really are. So this comes when you are faced with dread, when you are faced with angst. Once you realize that your life is oriented towards death, or your life is moving towards death, then you try to change the way in which you live. You try to change the way in which you see things, right? In other words, angst is what Dasein experiences when it becomes aware that death is a fundamental fact that shapes our existence and our course of life. The mental state of dread enables us to rise above our dispersion in immediate transitory affair of the world and reflect upon it as a whole in the fullest glare of its finitude. Now, to put it in simple words, if you face death, once you have a near death experience, then you would care less about trivial things, transitory affairs of the world. നിങ്ങൾ ഡെത്തുമായിട്ട് മുഖാമുഖം നിൽക്കുമ്പോൾ ആ ഒരു ടൈമിന് നിങ്ങൾ വളരെ മണ്ടെയിനായിട്ടുള്ള ഓർഡിനറി ആയിട്ടുള്ള തിങ്സിൽ ഫോക്കസ് കൊടുക്കില്ല, റൈറ്റ്? യൂഷ്വലി നമ്മൾ ജീവിക്കുമ്പോൾ നമ്മൾ നമ്മുടെ സ്വത്വത്തിൽ ഫോക്കസ് കൊടുക്കാതെ നമ്മൾ അന്നന്ന് ജീവിക്കുന്നതിൽ മാത്രം ഫോക്കസ് കൊടുക്കും. അന്നന്ന് നമ്മൾ എങ്ങനെ ജീവിക്കുന്നു, നമ്മൾ ആരാണെന്നൊന്നും നമ്മൾ കൂടുതൽ ചിന്തിക്കാനായിട്ട് പോവില്ല. പക്ഷെ നമ്മൾ എങ്ങനെയാണ് ജീവിക്കുന്നത് എന്നൊക്കെ ഉള്ള കാര്യങ്ങളിൽ മാത്രം നമ്മൾ ഫോക്കസ് കൊടുക്കത്തേ. ബട്ട് വൺസ് യു ആർ ഫേസ്ഡ് വിത്ത് ഡെത്തിനെ നിങ്ങൾ മുഖാമുഖം കാണുമ്പോൾ ആ ഒരു പോയിന്റിൽ ഒരു കൈൻഡ് ഓഫ് ഡ്രെഡ് നിങ്ങളിലുണ്ടാവും, ഒരു ആങ്സ്റ്റ് നിങ്ങളിലുണ്ടാവും, ഒരു ഭയം. ആ ഭയം നിങ്ങളെ സാധാരണ മണ്ടെയിൻ ലൈഫ് സ്റ്റൈൽ ലീഡ് ചെയ്യുന്നത് മാറ്റി ചിന്തിപ്പിക്കും. നിങ്ങൾ കുറച്ചും കൂടെ ലൈഫിനെ ഫോക്കസ് ചെയ്യാനായിട്ട് തുടങ്ങും. നിങ്ങൾ നിങ്ങളുടെ സ്വത്വത്തിലോട്ട് ഫോക്കസ് ചെയ്യാനായിട്ട് തുടങ്ങും. ഞാൻ ആരാണ് എന്നുള്ളൊരു ക്വസ്റ്റിലോട്ടൊക്കെ ഇറങ്ങി പുറപ്പെടാനായിട്ട് നിങ്ങൾക്ക് തോന്നും. അപ്പോൾ അതുണ്ടാകുന്നത് എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് നമ്മൾ ഡെത്തുമായി മുഖാമുഖം നിൽക്കുമ്പോഴാണ്. അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഇന്ന് ഞാൻ ജനിച്ചാൽ നാളെ ഞാൻ മരിക്കും എന്നുള്ളൊരു തോട്ടോടു കൂടി ജീവിച്ചാൽ മാത്രമേ നമുക്ക് നമ്മുടെ ട്രൂ സെൽഫിനെ മനസ്സിലാക്കാനായി കഴിയൂ എന്നാണ് ഹൈഡഗർ പറഞ്ഞത്. റൈറ്റ്. അപ്പം ഇത്രയും കാര്യങ്ങൾ നിങ്ങളൊന്ന് ഓർത്ത് വയ്ക്കുക. മെയിനായിട്ടുള്ള ഇമ്പോർട്ടൻ്റ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള പോയിൻറ്റ്സ് ഒന്ന് ഓർത്ത് വയ്ക്കുക. ഇതിൽ ആദ്യം പറഞ്ഞ പോയിന്റ് എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് ഫിനോമിനോളജിക്കൽ ടെസ്റ്റിമോണീനെ പറ്റിയിട്ടാണ്. അതായത് വി ഓൾവേസ് ഫീൽ ആങ്ഷ്യസ് ആൻഡ് this anxiety or insecurity arises from the feeling of groundlessness we feel of human existence. ഹ്യൂമൻ എക്സിസ്റ്റൻസ് ഇൻ ഇറ്റ് സെൽഫ് എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് ഒരു മീനിങ്ലെസ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു തിങ് ആണെന്ന് നമുക്ക് പലപ്പോഴും തോന്നുമ്പോഴാണ് നമുക്ക് ഒരു ആങ്സൈറ്റി ഫീൽ ചെയ്യുന്നത്, ഒരു ഇൻസെക്യൂരിറ്റി ഫീൽ ചെയ്യുന്നത്. റൈറ്റ്. ദെൻ വി ഫീൽ ഇൻസെക്യൂർ ബിക്കോസ് everything is preordained, or we feel that everything is preordained from the past. പാസ്റ്റിൽ തന്നെ നമ്മുടെ ഐഡൻറ്റിറ്റിയും റൂൾസും ഒക്കെ അസൈൻ ചെയ്തിട്ടുണ്ട്. സോ ഫ്രം ദ ടൈം ഇൻ വിച്ച് വി ആർ ബോൺ വി ആർ ത്രോൺ ഇൻ ടു certain rules and certain identities. This is very important. The moment you are born, you are thrown to certain identities and certain rules, and you live those roles and identities. അത് വളരെ ഇമ്പോർട്ടൻ്റ് ആണ്. നമ്മൾ ജനിക്കുമ്പോൾ തന്നെ നമ്മൾ ആരുടെ മകനായിട്ടാണ് ജനിക്കുന്നതിൻ്റെ ബേസിസിൽ നമ്മുടെ ജീവിതം എങ്ങനെയായിരിക്കും എന്ന് ഓൾറെഡി ഡിസൈൻഡ് ആണ്. നമ്മൾ ആണായിട്ടാണോ പെണ്ണായിട്ടാണോ ജനിക്കുന്നത് അതിൻ്റെ ബേസിസിൽ നമ്മളുടെ ലൈഫ് എങ്ങനെയായിരിക്കും എന്നുള്ളത് ഓൾറെഡി ഓർഡൈൻഡ് ആണ്. നമുക്ക് ചേഞ്ച് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റില്ല. So the identities that we take, the things that define us, it is all already there. അപ്പോൾ ഇതിനെയാണ് നമ്മൾ the state of thrownness എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. And we are also aware that if you are born, then you will die one day. ഹ്യൂമൻ ബീങ്സിന് മാത്രമുള്ളൊരു കഴിവാണ്. നമ്മളിപ്പോൾ ഇന്ന് ജനിച്ചിട്ടുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ നാളെ മരിക്കുമെന്നുള്ളൊരു പൂർണ്ണ ബോധ്യം ഹ്യൂമൻ ബീങ്സിന് ഉണ്ട്. Right. And the third thing that we try to do is that once you live, you try to create an identity on your own. You try to leave a unique image of your own existence and potential. The third characteristic is that of fallenness. That is, in attempting to create himself or herself, the human being falls from his true being and he gets immersed instead in the distractions of day-to-day life. അപ്പോൾ നമ്മുടെ ഡേ ടു ഡേ ഡിസ്ട്രാക്ഷൻസ്, നമ്മൾ എത്രയൊക്കെ നമ്മുടെ ട്രൂ സെൽഫിനെ ഇൻവെൻറ്റ് ചെയ്യാനായിട്ട് നമ്മളിരുന്നാലും ഡേ ടു ഡേ ഡിസ്ട്രാക്ഷൻസ് നമ്മളെ ചിലപ്പോൾ നമ്മുടെ ട്രൂ സെൽഫ് എന്താണെന്ന് മനസ്സിലാക്കുന്നതിൽ നിന്നും വ്യതിചലിച്ച് കൊണ്ടുപോകും. സോ ഇൻസ്റ്റെഡ് ഓഫ് ഫൈൻഡിങ് അവർ ഒത്തൻറ്റിക് സെൽഫ്, we become engulfed with the cares and distractions of the world. If you wish to become a good teacher, but then again you have other roles to play in the family. So always നിങ്ങൾക്ക് ആ ഒരു good teacher എന്ന റോള് ഫോളോ ചെയ്യാനായിട്ട് പറ്റില്ല. So your authentic self gets buried behind the cares and distractions of the world. Now how can a person free himself from an inauthentic existence? ഒരു ഇൻഒത്തൻറ്റിക് ആയിട്ടുള്ളൊരു ലൈഫ് ലീഡ് ചെയ്യുന്ന ഒരാൾ, ഡേ ടു ഡേ ആക്ടിവിറ്റീസിൽ മാത്രം ഫോക്കസ് ചെയ്ത് ലൈഫ് ലീഡ് ചെയ്യുന്ന ഒരാൾക്ക് ആ ലൈഫിൽ നിന്നൊരു മോചനം വേണമെങ്കിൽ he should be faced with death, he should be faced with fear and angst, then he will change the way in which he looks at life എന്നാണ് ഹൈഡഗർ പറഞ്ഞത്. റൈറ്റ്. Then he won't be focusing at the fleeting events of the world. വേൾഡിൽ നടക്കുന്ന ചെറിയ ചെറിയ മണ്ടേൻ ആയിട്ടുള്ള എവറിഡേ കാര്യങ്ങൾ ഫോക്കസ് ചെയ്യുന്നതിന് പകരം, ഓർഡിനറി ആയിട്ടുള്ള കാര്യങ്ങൾ ഫോക്കസ് ചെയ്യുന്നതിന് പകരം ഡെത്തിനെ മുഖാമുഖം കാണുന്ന ഒരു മനുഷ്യൻ ജീവിതത്തിനെ തന്നെ, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ താൻ ആരാണ് എന്ന ക്വസ്റ്റിനെ തന്നെ മറ്റൊരു പെർസ്പെക്റ്റീവിൽ നിന്ന് നോക്കിക്കാണാനായിട്ട് തുടങ്ങും. റൈറ്റ്. അതിന് കൂടുതൽ ഇമ്പോർട്ടൻസ് കൊടുക്കാനായിട്ട് തുടങ്ങും. Now let's take a look at the poem Who's Who by W.H. Auden. A shilling life will give you all the facts. How father beat him, how he ran away, what were the struggles of his youth, what acts made him the greatest figure of his day. Of how he fought, fished, hunted, worked all night, though giddy climbed new mountains, named a sea. Some of the last researchers even write, love made him weep his spines like you and me. With all his honors on, he sighed for one who, say astonished critics, lived at home, did little jobs about the house with skill and nothing else, could whistle, would sit still, or potter round the garden, answered some of his long, marvelous letters, but kept none. So, this is a wonderful poem. This is constructed in the form of a sonnet. You have 8 lines in the beginning, there is an octave in the beginning, and 6 lines in the second stanza, that is the sestet. The octave, the first 8 lines, describes the life of a very prominent, popular man, and the sestet describes the life of his lady love. Now let's take a look at the poem in detail. The poem was written probably in 1934 and was published in W.H. Auden's collection Look Stranger. So the Look Stranger came out in the year 1936, so that is important. The name is also important. They might ask this for a 1-mark question. This sonnet contrasts the public life of a famous man of our time in the octave and the private truth of his emotional life and the life of the person he loved in the sestet. So the poem is divided into 2, an octave and a sestet. In the octave, we get to see the man and his public life as a public figure. So this is a very famous man. And then in the sestet, we come across his emotional side. We get to know his private world, and we get to know about the person whom he loved in the sestet. Right. So the sonnet form has helped Auden to think in a very short manner, but in a very informative manner. Now let's take a look at the poem. Line by line. A shilling life will give you all the facts. How father beat him, how he ran away, what made the struggle of his youth, what acts made him the greatest figure of his day. So a shilling life here refers to a disinherited life. They might ask this for the exam. What is a shilling life? A shilling life is a disinherited life. Now, if a person is disinherited, what do you mean by disinherited? When a person's father and mother decide that he will be disowned or he won't be given any part of the family property, then that means that the person is disinherited. ചിലർക്ക് സ്വത്തുകൾ ഒന്നും കൊടുക്കാതെ ഞാൻ നിനക്ക് സ്വത്തൊന്നും തരില്ല എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞ് പാരൻസ് പടിയടച്ച് പിണ്ടം വെക്കും എന്ന് പറയില്ലേ, അങ്ങനെയുള്ളൊരു ഡിസ്ഇൻഹെറിറ്റഡ് ലൈഫിനെ പറ്റിയിട്ടാണ് ഇവിടെ പറയുന്നത്. മലയാളത്തിൽ നമ്മൾ പടിയടച്ച് പിണ്ടം വെക്കുക എന്ന് പറയും. അതായത് നമ്മുടെ അച്ഛനും അമ്മയ്ക്കും നമ്മളുമായിട്ടൊരു ബന്ധമില്ല എന്നൊക്കെ പറയുന്ന ഒരു സ്റ്റേറ്റ്. അപ്പം അങ്ങനെയുള്ളൊരു സ്റ്റേറ്റിലാണ് നമ്മുടെ ഹീറോ ഇരിക്കുന്നത്. സോ ദ ഫസ്റ്റ് ആൻസർ ഇൻട്രൊഡ്യൂസസ് ദി അൺനെയിംഡ് ഹീറോ ഓഫ് ദ പോം. The poem begins with a statement that a disinherited life will give you fact. So once you get to know a person who is disinherited, that disinherited life will give you some facts, some truths about life. Now, what are these truths? So you will get to know that a person who is disinherited was beaten black and blue by his father when he was a child. ഒരു ആളെ ഡിസിൻഹെറിറ്റ് ചെയ്യുക എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് വളരെ കോൾഡ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരാൾക്കേ പറ്റൂ, റൈറ്റ്? ഒരു പാരൻ്റ് ആണെങ്കിൽ പോലും വളരെ കോൾഡ് ഹാർട്ടഡ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരാളെ ഡിസിൻഹെറിറ്റ് ചെയ്യാനായിട്ട് പറ്റും. So the person, the hero of the poem, was disinherited, and it shows light on the kind of life he lived, right? So our hero, when he was a child, used to get beatings from his father. So his father was a strict disciplinarian. That is again reflected in the fact that this man was disinherited by his father. So his father was a very strict disciplinarian, so he had to run away from home. So again, when you compare it with the concept of Dasein എന്ന കോൺസെപ്റ്റ് എടുത്താണ് നമ്മൾ ജനിക്കുന്നതിന് മുന്നേ തന്നെ നമ്മുടെ ഫേറ്റ് ഡിസൈൻ ചെയ്തിരിക്കുന്നു എന്നാണ് പറയുന്നത്, റൈറ്റ്? സോ ഈവൻ ബിഫോർ എ പേഴ്സൺ ഇസ് ബോൺ, how he will be raised is already preordained. So here our hero was disinherited, and when we look at his past, we will get to know that the person never had a very cordial relation with his father. ഇയാളുടെ പാസ്റ്റ് എടുത്ത് നോക്കുകയാണെങ്കിലും അയാളുടെ അച്ഛനുമായിട്ട് അയാൾക്ക് നല്ല ഫ്രണ്ട്ലി റിലേഷൻ ആയിരുന്നില്ല എന്ന് മനസ്സിലാവും. ഹിസ് ഫാദർ യൂസ് ടു ബീറ്റ് ഹിം, സോ ഹി റാൻ അവേ ഫ്രം ഹിസ് ഹൗസ് ആൻഡ് ദസ് ഹി വാസ് ഡിസിൻഹെറിറ്റഡ്, റൈറ്റ്? അങ്ങനെയാണ് അയാളെ ഡിസിൻഹെറിറ്റ് ചെയ്തത്. അതായത് അച്ഛൻ എന്നും ഇയാളെ പിടിച്ചടിക്കുമായിരുന്നു, ഇയാൾക്കത് താങ്ങാൻ വയ്യാതെ ഇയാൾ നാട് വിട്ടു. നാട് വിട്ട ആൾക്ക് ആരും സ്വത്തൊന്നും എഴുതി വെച്ച് കൊടുക്കില്ല. And thus he became disinherited. So the past shaping the present, and nothing can be changed because his father is a disciplinarian and nothing can change his father's behavior. Notwithstanding the struggles of his youth, he became a great man. So the poem also states that the person who is introduced in the poem, the person who was disinherited, later on became a great man. And it is here in these lines, seen reflected in these lines. What were the struggles of his youth? What acts made him the greatest figure of his day? But he faced several struggles in his youth, and then he became a great man. He became a greater figure in his day. Next lines from the octave. അപ്പോൾ നമ്മൾ ആദ്യത്തെ 4 ലൈൻസ് നോക്കി. ഒക്ടേവിൻ്റെ അടുത്ത 4 ലൈൻസ് ആണ്. Of how he fought, fished, hunted, worked all night, though giddy, climbed new mountains, named a sea. Some of the last researchers even write, love made him weep his spines like you and me. So the second stanza gives more details about him. In the second stanza, we are told the things that made this man great. Now, the first line of the second stanza, it uses a lot of action verbs, right? Like fought, fished, hunted, worked all night. So this shows that our hero is a man of action. He fought, he fished, he hunted, he worked. All these are action verbs. It shows that our hero was a man of action. He worked all night, and thus he became a great person. It is made clear that he was an explorer, because though giddy, he climbed new mountains. Though he was giddy, though he was afraid of heights, he still climbed new mountains. And even he named a sea. So he was an explorer both in land as well as in sea. So he was a man of action. Some of the last researchers even write, love made him weep his spines like you and me. So some of the researches that were conducted on him, some of the researches that were conducted on his love life revealed that love made him weep. So some of these researchers, your researchers might also be a reference to random people who observe your life from the outside, right? ഇപ്പോൾ നിങ്ങളുടെ നെയ്ബേഴ്സിനെയൊക്കെ പോലെ ചിലപ്പോൾ നിങ്ങളുടെ ജീവിതം പുറത്തുനിന്ന് നോക്കി കാണുന്നവരെയൊക്കെ നമുക്കിങ്ങനെ റിസർച്ചേഴ്സിന് കളിയാക്കി വിളിക്കുന്ന പോലെയാണ്. So the people who studied about his life, since he's a great man, people might study about his life, his personal life. So people who studied about his life were privy of his personal life. They knew about his personal life, and they knew that he had a love, but that love was unrequited, and that love made him weep. The love made him cry. So it also implies that serious research was conducted on the man's love life. So it shows that a series of research was conducted on the man's love life, and also that serious research was conducted on the man's personal life. Next line, with all his honors on, he sighed for one who say astonished critics lived at home. So he had many honors bestowed upon him. The man who is introduced in this poem is a very active person. He is a very well-known man. He had many honors to his name. He even named a sea, and he even climbed a mountain. But he sighed for one. He let out a sigh for one. ഇത്രയൊക്കെ ആണെങ്കിലും അയാൾ ഒരാളുടെ മുന്നിലാണ് മുട്ടുകുത്തിയത്, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഒരാളുടെ മുന്നിലാണ് അയാൾ തോറ്റുപോയത്. അതാരായിരുന്നു? ആ തോറ്റുപോയ ആൾ അയാളുടെ വീട്ടിൽ തന്നെ താമസിക്കുന്നുണ്ടായിരുന്നു. So with all his honors on, he sighed for one who say astonished critic lived at home. So though this man was lauded, though he was appreciated by everyone in the world, he sought honor from just one person, and that one person lived in home with him. Maybe it is his love. So he sought the honor from one person, but that one person didn't even honor him, right? The man pined for love from somebody at home, but he never got that love back. The critics were astonished because the man who was the cynosure of old eyes craved for love of one who lived within the confines of a home. So even the critics were astonished by his behavior. With all his honors on his side for one, who say astonished critics lived at home. So the critics were astonished to find out that this man who has great honors, who was the cynosure of old eyes, who was considered to be a very important person by everyone, he pined for the love of a person who lived in the confines of a home. ഒരു വീടിൻ്റെ 4 ചുവരുകൾക്കുള്ളിൽ ജീവിച്ചിരുന്ന ഒരാളിൽ നിന്നാണ് എല്ലാവരും അറിയപ്പെട്ടിരുന്ന ഈ പോപ്പുലർ ആയിട്ടുള്ളൊരു മനുഷ്യൻ acceptance ചോദിച്ചത് എന്നാണ് പറയുന്നത്. റൈറ്റ്. സോ this person who was the object of affection of the hero, this person might be a he or she. W.H. Auden was homosexual, so the person might be a he or she. So the person whom the hero of the poem lived inside a house. He or she did little jobs inside the house and nothing else. They would just potter around the garden. Potter around the garden means to do unimportant things. So the object of the hero's affection would just sit still in the garden or would do some meaningless work in the garden. And he or she promptly answered some of his letters but never kept them safe. So the person loved a man or a woman. It is ambiguous whether the person loved a man or a woman, since this poem is partly autobiographical. Some say that it might have been a man because W.H. Auden was a homosexual. But still, here the poet says that the object of his affection, the object of the hero's affection, right? He or she never wrote him back. ഇപ്പോൾ ഈ ഹീറോയുടെ സ്നേഹമെല്ലാം ഏറ്റുവാങ്ങിയ ആള് ഒരിക്കലും ഈ ഹീറോയിനെ സ്നേഹിച്ചിരുന്നില്ല എന്നാണ് പറയുന്നത്. റൈറ്റ്. സോ ദിസ് പേഴ്സൺ യൂസ് ടു റൈറ്റ് ലെറ്റേഴ്സ് ടു ഹെർ ബട്ട് ഷീ നെവർ റെസ്പോണ്ടഡ്. ഓർ the poet might have wrote letters to him but he never responded. Neither did he or she keep it safe. Right? So that shows that even though he was accepted by everyone in the world, he was not accepted by the one person whom he loved, who lived in his own home. So she used to reply to his letters but never kept them safe. സോ ഇങ്ങനെ നമ്മൾക്കറിയാവുന്ന ഒരുപാട് ആൾക്കാർ കാണും. പുറമേ എല്ലാവരും സ്നേഹിക്കുകയും ആദരിക്കുകയും ബഹുമാനിക്കുകയൊക്കെ ചെയ്യുന്ന ആൾ, പക്ഷേ റിയൽ ലൈഫിലോട്ട് വരുമ്പോൾ, ഫാമിലി ലൈഫിലോട്ട് വരുമ്പോൾ അയാളെ സ്നേഹിക്കേണ്ട ആ ഒരൊറ്റ ആൾ തിരിച്ചയാളെ സ്നേഹിക്കില്ല, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അയാൾക്ക് കൊടുക്കേണ്ട ആ ഒരു റെസ്പെക്റ്റ് കൊടുക്കില്ല. രണ്ടുപേരും രണ്ട് ഡിഫറെൻറ്റ് ഇൻഡിവിജ്വൽസ് ആണ്. ഒരാൾ വളരെ ഫ്ലാഷി ആയിട്ടുള്ളൊരു പബ്ലിക് ലൈഫുള്ള ഒരാളാണ്, മറ്റേ ആളെന്ന് പറയുന്നത് വളരെ അടക്കവും ഒതുക്കമുള്ളൊരു പ്രൈവറ്റ് ലൈഫുള്ള ഒരാളാണ്. രണ്ടുപേരുടെ ലൈഫും തമ്മിൽ നല്ല വ്യത്യാസമുണ്ട്. വൺ പേഴ്സൺ ലെഫ്റ്റ് ഹിസ് ഹോം and hearth, he was disinherited. Then he made a name on his own. The other person lived maybe in a very good home and lived in comforts of a home, and she was perfectly happy with little things. She was very good at keeping the home and hearth, and he or she would often whistle. Sometimes they would sit still or walk around the garden, potter around the garden doing meaningless things. So this is the way in which two different persons are brought up. One person was a hard worker, the other person was very much happy just living out her life in the confines of a home. ഒരാൾ വീടിൻ്റെ 4 ചുവരുകൾക്കുള്ളിൽ സന്തോഷം കണ്ടെത്തിയപ്പോൾ മറ്റൊരാളെന്ന് പറയുന്നത് ലോകത്തിലോട്ട് ഇറങ്ങിച്ചെന്ന് ഒരുപാട് ഡിസ്കവറീസ് ആൻഡ് ഇൻവെൻഷൻസ് നടത്തിയതിലൂടെയാണ് സന്തോഷം കണ്ടെത്തിയത്. രണ്ടുപേരും രണ്ട് ഡിഫറെൻറ്റ് പേഴ്സണാലിറ്റീസ് ആണ്. അതുകൊണ്ട് തന്നെ they never felt in sync with each other. രണ്ടുപേരും പെർഫെക്റ്റ് സിങ്കിലൊന്നും ആയിരുന്നില്ല. And this man wanted the love and affection of his lover, but his lover never reciprocated because his lover had an entirely different life than him. Now, let's try to compare and contrast this poem with the concept of Dasein. The man in the poem has one kind of existence which is entirely opposite or contrapuntal to the kind of existence that his lady love lives. They are nurtured in two different environments. One was disinherited by his father. He lived a very difficult life. He had to earn on his own, and that made him a self made man. The other person, the woman, was more comfortable in the home. She did all the household chores in a perfect manner. But when the man wrote letters to her, she responded back, but she never collected them or kept them safe. That shows that she was never truly interested in him, because the two people have two different personality. One is a homebody, one is an introvert. The woman is an introvert, she's a homebody, whereas the man is an extrovert and a public figure. So they are nurtured or they are brought up in two different environments. So they fail to bond with each other. The Dasein makes them incompatible. The way in which they were brought up, their past, makes them incompatible. Similarly, the thrownness experienced by both of them are so distinct that they fail to impress each other, right? So both of them were thrown into this world in two different settings. One person was brought up in a very abusive environment, whereas the other person was brought up in a very warm environment. It shaped the way in which they lived. So much so that one person yearned for love from the other, but he never got it because she was perfectly happy and complacent, living life in her own terms. And the man, though he received love from everywhere, he never received the true love from the person whom he loved. So the experiences that they face is already determined by their past. So in the past, the man was brought up by a father. So the man might have yearned for love from his father, but he never got it from him. The woman was brought up in a very docile environment. So she knew how to keep the home and hearth clean. So she dedicated her life in keeping the home and hearth clean, but she didn't have much emotions. She didn't show any emotion towards her lover or husband. That made them incompatible. The way in which they were brought up, that made them incompatible. So that is the poem, and it explains beautifully how Dasein shapes the destiny of a person. So with that, we come to an end to today's lecture. If you have any doubts on this particular poem, feel free to ask. Thank you for listening. Take care.